On this Friday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, where can the Houston Texans get better, and what are you looking forward to after the bye?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Texans fan, to a Friday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you to all of our new listeners. Make sure that you subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And to our returning listeners, thank you for lending your ear for another day. I'm your Texans football analyst, one who has caught a lot of slander this week. John, some
rightfully so.
Hickman, rightfully so or unrightfully so. But as always, I'm joined by the man with the plan, the eyes around the Houston Texans building, your Texans credential media member and Sports Illustrated's own Cody Davis. Before we get started, today's episode is brought to you by none other than Prize Picks, one of my favorite apps. Listen, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first-time deposit match up to $100. How aggressive should Nick Caserio be heading into the trade deadline, which is in 13 days, Cody? Am I right?
2 weeks, basically. 12 now, a little under 2 weeks now.
Okay, well, around 2 weeks. What are you looking forward to after the bye, which is this week, where Houston had an opportunity to rest players, get healthier, but more importantly, like D'Amico Ryan said, take time away, be with your family, go do the things that actually matter in life. Before we talk about that, let's get started with, where can the Texans get better?
Well, I think the Texans can actually get better at getting after the quarterback, but not only that, just completing sacks in general. And John, this was brought to my attention on Monday when Coach D'Amico Ryans was asked about the defense's performance. And he said, even though he loved how well the defense played, he do wish that the Texans actually did a better job at completing sacks, because when you go back and you take a look at Sunday's game against the New Orleans Saints, which, by the way, Texans fans, I know a lot of us was watching that game. I apologize. The Saints might be one of the most disappointing teams in the league this year, because that was a game that the Texans needed. Oh, go ahead, John.
Or you can look at it like this, and this is I'm advocating for the Texans fans out there before we move forward. Maybe the Houston Texans just broke them.
I wouldn't necessarily say broke them, because it was already – I wouldn't necessarily say broke them, because they was already having issues before the game against the Houston Texans, which, by the way, I do understand that they won. What was it, like 34-0? No disrespect to New England, but prior to that, there was already issues. But when going back to Sunday's game against the Saints, they created 23 pressures on Derek Carr, and guess how many sacks they came away with? 2. Yeah. Jonathan Gennard and Malik Collins. And even when you go back and you take a look at how well Will Anderson played, I think that was Will Anderson's best game getting after the quarterback. He created, I can't remember the number, but somewhere in the ballpark of like 6 to 7 pressures he accounted for, and he didn't come away with a sack. He came close. He got like 2 or 3 quarterback hits, but he did not record a sack. And that's just for that game alone. When you look at the first 6 games of the season as a whole, they have recorded 49 pressures, which is, I believe, 14th in the league, 22 quarterback hits, and guess how many sacks they have recorded for the entire season?
I think 5.
No, 9.
9.
So
led by John Gennard, I believe.
Yeah, led by John Gennard. And this also goes into why I was excited about the signing of Myjai Sanders, because I think if you get him, a guy that's really good at rushing a passer, maybe that can be a guy that's actually going to create even more opportunities for, if not himself, but for other teammates on that defensive front to go out there and actually execute the sack. So that is my big, where can the Texans get better at going into the second half of this season?
I think for me, where I think Houston can get better at right now is just expanding the playbook and continuing being creative, and this is directly for Bobby Slork. Now, that comes with the territory of, making sure that you have adequate amount of snaps for both of your running backs, right? We saw when Houston went up against the Atlanta Falcons, Damian Pierce came out of that game with 20 carries, but Devin Singletary had 0. The following game, they kind of basically split carries, and Houston went out there and was able to rush for over 100 yards on a day, 120. And you saw at times, specifically in the first half, where that offense was kind of moving the ball, explosive, and they had more of a wide range of their playbook. You also saw Xavier Hutchinson, a player who I think that little role for him, getting him involved on the field, whether it be by run or maybe mixing it up by giving him the ball through the air. That little role for Xavier Hutchinson kind of expanded on that, but you saw Houston be able to kind of deep dive into their playbook. And I think for Houston right now, offensively, you're going to be led by your quarterback in that passing attack. One of the best in the NFL, top 10 offense in terms of passing yards.
Top 10 offense. Lord have mercy.
First time we've said that since Sean Watson's last year. And they won 4 games that year. I think Houston has an opportunity to not only eclipse but surpass that 4-game mark. In order to do so, for Bobby Slork, he went on a 2-game run back when they beat the Jags, and that second game versus the Steelers, where Houston put up 30 points back to back. But that offense was fluid those 2 games. Kind of went stale a little bit against the Atlanta Falcons throughout the game, but it wasn't a full game of the ball moving, the play calling, and back-to-back games. We saw it in the first half against the New Orleans Saints. That offense was moving a little bit better. The second half, you saw Houston get a little bit stale on offense. So moving forward, not only am I looking for you to open your playbook consistently, but also have a consistent 4 quarters worth of play calling. And I think it's there because we've seen it. In order for Houston to have an opportunity to make a run, it's going to come down to how can TJ carry you. I know that sucks because he's a rookie quarterback. We're placing a lot on him. But with the offense opening up, guys, I've been criticized throughout the entire week, but we are going to have to see a better run effort on the ground. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. We're going to have to see more guys involved. We know that Nico is the top dog offensively in terms of receiver, and after that, we can look at Tank Dell, and I think the pick order goes Tank Dell, Robert Woods. But Dalton Schultz got to continually get involved, which he has been in the last couple of games, 3 touchdowns in 2 games. And the rest of the guys, I would like to see more of John Mechie, just putting all of your players out on the field that can help you in different situations in order to keep the ball moving, keep the drive moving, continue to convert on those third down, and hopefully get into the red zone where Houston has been fairly good this year in scoring points. Snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, they got a deal for all new customers. Come here, let me tell you what it is. You get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. $5 is $200. $5, $200. You're coming out on top. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. $5, $200. $5, $200. Y'all get the point. This app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. So listen, to their phone, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. To all of our new listeners, thank you for lending your ear for the first time. And to our returning listeners, I'm sending you hugs on this Good Friday. What are we looking forward to after the bye? Cody, I'm going to keep it simple. Because there's one man who stood in the face of fire throughout the entire offseason. And we was doing Locked On AFC South episodes, and I was taking trips to other podcasts, and I was on this podcast. In the face of dangers and naysayers, there was one man who said, I believe when I look at this division, this team
I give you that.
make a playoff pusher. If you ask me, what am I looking forward to after the bye, an early bye for Houston? The Jags won on Thursday night, so that puts them at 5-2, I believe. 5-2. Houston can come back. They can beat the Carolina Panthers. And what I am looking forward to after that is for Houston to make a playoff push. Now,
don't even sound real to say that right now.
as I stood in the face of fire, I said, well, I think the Tennessee Titans are in the same boat as Houston, and if they're going to move forward Anthony Richardson like Houston's moving forward with C.J. Stroud, I'm rolling with C.J. Stroud over Anthony Richardson, so therefore I'm rolling with the Texans over the Indianapolis Colts. I looked at the Tennessee Titans and I said to myself, I just don't see it happening with Ryan Tannehill. And if Ryan Tannehill isn't your quarterback, that leaves you with either Will Levis or Malik Willis. And I believe that we're finally going to see Will Levis soon. So, again, not putting a lot of faith in it. And I also believe that Tennessee is going to move on from Derrick Henry. I also look at their team. They're going to have to blow it up. This is the last year that they can hold on to a lot of those pieces. So we talk about Denver a lot at the end of the year. I'm looking forward to the AFC South mate Tennessee Titans letting go a lot of players. I'm looking at Jags, and I said they got to prove it to me again. They had a lot of things go their way this year that may not go went their way last year that may not go their way this year. But for Houston, they have an opportunity to make a playoff push, whether by winning the division or – did you guys know they are a half a game out of seventh place, which put them at their last wild card spot? That's the only thing I'm looking forward to. We talked about how Houston can get better. If they get better, Cody, you mentioned on the defensive side of the ball, getting after the quarterback consistently, getting those sacks. On the offensive side of the ball, being more consistent offensively with play calling and being able to sustain drives and being able to keep those, picking up third downs. If they do that with their schedule, I believe they have a shot to make the playoffs. And why not take it to the playoffs? Because I've seen a lot of people, why make the playoffs? Why go to the playoffs? It's still a rebuilding year. Y'all do know that y'all pick is not for y'all this year. And that pick goes to Arizona. So you make the playoffs, the fan base is happy, the players are happy. Nick Caserio is happy because he's keeping his job. Nico Ryans is happy because in his
Coach of the
year, they went to not hot to flopping to hot, one of the hottest teams in the NFL, a quick turnaround, and Arizona doesn't get a top 5 pick. So that's exactly what I'm looking forward to, guys. I think Houston has a chance, and I want to see it come out.
For me, I'm gonna keep mine simple as well, and that is just to consistently build on the positivity and the promise that you guys built. John, I would have never imagined 6 games into the season we're sitting here talking about the possibility of the Houston Texans making the playoffs. And look, let me just say this in terms of the positivity. You and I, we started covering this team in 2019, but we was trying to establish ourselves and stuff, but we really started to get into the grooves in 2020. Ever since you and I have been covering this team, and I'm talking about covering this team on the beat, being around NRG Stadium, being on the Zoom conferences during COVID and everything else in between, there was never nothing to look forward to. And I'm not even gonna lie to you, John, listeners and viewers, I started to get jealous because you looked over at Locked On UH. They making March Madness tournaments and stuff. And I understand that I've been covering another rebuilding team, but when you look over at Locked On Rockets, at least they got promising young players that's going to turn into something special in the next couple of years, hopefully this year. And then you got Locked On Astros, which, by the way, shout out to the Houston Astros. 18 runs in the last 2 games. The ALCS is tied. First of all,
2-2. And they have a shot. They play better on. They've been playing better on the road in the last 2 games, so they can come back to Houston
3-2. Ladies and gentlemen, just enjoy the dynasty that you are witnessing with the Houston Astros. But you look over at Houston Astros, not only are they covering Hall of Fame players, but they're covering a dynasty and one of the most remarkable runs, probably not just in MLB history, but now you got to start considering, okay, where does this rank up in sports alone? But when you look at the Houston Texans, man, it was just like everything that we talked about was like negative at one point. And you saw it take an impact on the fan base. You saw it take an impact on the coaches. You saw it take an impact on Nick Caserio when he got here. You saw it take an impact on the players on the field. I'll never forget that game that they lost against the Washington Commanders when they was down like 20-3 at halftime or somewhere during the first half.
Was that the Kyle Allen game?
Was that the? Yeah, I think it was the Kyle Allen game. I've never seen NRG Stadium that dead in my life, and to see all of the moves that they made, and for you know me, John, I believed in this regime with D'Amico Ryans. I always believed in CJ and Will. Always loved that move. I love the young players that they brought in, not just for this year, but last year. And even more so when you take a look back at what you got out of Nico Collins in, I believe that was in 2021, the veterans that you brought in. But I always believed in them, but I always say what? Give them time to develop. Because when you go back and you take a look at a lot of the preseason articles that I wrote, a lot of the preseason talks that you and I had, even on the Locked On Texans Wakanda Forever edition, I said we have to give this team time to develop, learn, and establish themselves. I thought without a shadow of a doubt, 6 games in, they would have a losing record. However, that hasn't been the case. You look at how well CJ Stroud has been. You look how well this offense has been. And not in the one thing that I loved about not just the offense, but the defensive side of the ball as well, they have been able to thrive when you look at the adversity that they have to overcome. And that is what actually gets me on both sides. And that is what actually gets me excited the most about this team. Because I'm like, we already know the adversities, injuries, not terrible play calling. Why are you favoring this guy over the other? I.e. Tank Dell over Noah Brown, which, by the way, that's going to be real interesting in the game next week against the Carolina Panthers. But every single week, they was able to make adjustments. Every single week, we saw this team get better and better and better. And it's to the point now, the energy, the excitement with reporters, through fans, through people that's just fans of the NFL alone. Like, I've never seen this much positivity and promise surrounding the Houston Texans in a very long time. And to be honest with you, John, that's what I'm looking forward to the most.
You know, you said something that we really got to get his coaching staff credit for, and that's adjustments. When you look around the NFL right now, it may not be quarter to quarter or half to half like you maybe want it consistently, which we've seen that here in Houston. But from game to game, you've seen the adjustments, right? And I would say from half to half, I go back to the Colts game, that first half compared to that second half, where it just felt like in that second half, they was like, CJ, just go out there and rip it. And you saw them being able to kind of try to mount a comeback. They fell short, but you saw them be able to put points up on the board in that second half. But then they made the adjustments, and in the following 2 games, they were able to keep that momentum going. Around the league, that's an issue for a lot of teams, the inability to make adjustments and for those adjustments to be effective. So I want to give credit where credit is due for D'Amico being able to make adjustments with the injuries as well, for Bobby Slowick, Chris Strauser, the offensive line. Like they've been able to make those adjustments, and those adjustments have been impactful to Houston being able to sit at 3-3, 6 games through the season. This is my opportunity to tell you guys about my favorite app that I'm using right now, and that is Prize Picks, the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick the more or less on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, and watch the winnings roll in. It's super easy, guys. So right now they got the NBA season, and they're even giving you right now with Steph Curry. Will Steph Curry make over half a point? You can take the less than or more than, and I'm hoping you take the more than on that. If you want to stick to the NFL, Jared Goff versus the Baltimore Ravens this Sunday, will he throw for more than 246.5 yards against that defense or less than? Super simple, super easy. And they also have the power play where you can win 25 times your money this season. So listen, go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use code lockedonnfl for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl or head to the app, download it on your phone, use promo code lockedonnfl for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers out there. I got killed this week by saying Houston should trade for a running back, but the real question is
not just a running back, Dalvin Cook.
And I also, and people overlooked when I said one of the running backs from Denver. Did I not say that?
Yeah, you did say one of the running backs from Denver.
Thank you. And that leads me to my point when we look at how aggressive Nick Caserio should be heading into the trade deadline. Of course, if it makes sense financially, that's and he's already said it. Mm-hmm. And when I look at this team, I think it does come down to what happens after that Carolina game. I think the Carolina game is pretty big for Houston because that will determine whether or not they can continue to keep up in the race to either win the division or make that seventh wild card spot. And I think for Houston, there are areas on this team that they can improve on. Going to get Monjay Sanders this week, I think eventually pay out for a defensive line that can have that additional depth. I would like to see Houston look at the D tackle market, see what's out there that they can use to improve on. I'm sorry, guys. But I think Nick Caserio should be aggressive if this team has a real shot. And I can't come out and say I'm looking forward to Houston making the playoffs and not acknowledge that they have a real shot and they need to improve. Contractually, I will look at guys that are either on the cheaper side of their deals or rookie contracts. So when I look at those two running backs up in Denver, I believe both of them are on rookie deals right now. And I think a late round pick, and Nick Caserio has shown since he's gotten to Houston that, excuse me, that those late round picks don't mean as much to him. And here's another thing about that. And I make this argument with my friend yesterday actually. For Houston to be aggressive, it works in their favor because we saw the New York Giants go on a building year. They made the playoffs last year, and they weren't expected to. They made the playoffs, and a lot of people were saying, okay, that's a good year to build off of. And I think this is the same thing for Houston. The difference is Houston doesn't immediately have to pay Daniel Jones a ton of money. Houston doesn't immediately have to franchise tag Saquon Barkley or pay Dexter Lawrence. They won't have to shell out the amount of money the New York Giants did or compared to some of the other teams. Your quarterback will be on a rookie deal for the next 3 years. So moving into next year, you still don't have to worry about shelling out a ton of money to one position. You can still spread it out. So I think it makes sense for Houston to go out there and evaluate who's on the market, who's going to be, what teams are going to be looking to trade certain players, and financially, how much will that player not only cost me this year, but moving forward. I think next year won't be a problem if that team has a player that can come in and impact your roster right away. I think Houston should be aggressive at the trade deadline, and I definitely think the top two positions I look at, number one is still running back, number two is still defensive tackle.
Oh, that sounds very interesting, John. For me, I said this a couple of days ago and we talked about it, and it really sparked my interest when I had an opportunity to ask Nick Caserio about how much the team's success goes into what you guys will or will not do at the trade deadline. And of course, he didn't really give nothing away, but he did say, of course, if it makes financial sense. And I 100% agree with that, and John. I'm not gonna say he should be too aggressive, but I think he should be aggressive in terms of adding more depth to this team. If there was two positions I'm looking at, one I would say adding depth to your defensive backfield, safety, because Eric Murray, for the first time ever, but we probably ever said this here on this show, Eric Murray has had a really good season and being a complementary piece to that defensive backfield, especially when you look at the injuries early on in the season to Jimmy Ward and Jalen Petrie. But he's on IR right now. And there's a possibility that he can miss an extended amount of time due to the knee injury that he sustained Sunday against the New Orleans Saints. So if there's somebody that you can go out there and trade for that, you know, the that you can fit in your salary cap space and not going to take too much and can add to your depth in the defensive backfield, I say go for it. And then two, and most importantly, you can never have too many playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. I know you say running back. I would say wide receiver. Don't get me wrong. This wide receiving core has truly blew my mind 6 games in, especially with the career year of Nico Collins.
That's crazy. However, 6 games in, he's having his career year.
I know. And I mean, there's 2 ways you could look at it, but it's true.
Oh, man. No, it's true. How many times did I say last year they left about 250 to 300 yards out on the field? So
that is
he's just
true.
Getting his money and getting his yards back with CJ Stroud. Shout out to Nico.
And that's the thing. It's not just CJ, it's him as well, because he worked constantly throughout this offseason to improve his durability and health. And, you know, that was probably the major knock in terms of Nico's game on the individual standpoint. Can he stay healthy? Knock on wood. Hopefully he continues. But this wide receiving core, if there's a guy that you can go out there and add, and I'm not talking about Jerry Jeudy. And look, even though I would love Devontae Adams here in the city of Houston, that's definitely not happening from what I've been told. But I would just love for them to just add at least one more playmaker to that wide receiving core that you can trust. Because even though Nico Collins has had a good year, Tank Dell has had a good year, Robert Wood has had a good year, and that's somebody I wasn't even high on coming into the season. Still waiting for John Mechie to, you know, come about, and Xavier Hutchinson. I believe we're going to see more of him. However, when you go back to that Atlanta Falcons game, there's one thing I said that still remains true. If nobody steps up as this team's number 1 wide receiver, this offense is going to struggle. And I think if you just add somebody with that capability, I think this offense is definitely going to be even more dangerous, even more explosive, especially when you have 7 back there taking snaps.
Really quick, Cody, we got to find out what's going on with Derek Stingley next week. Got to find that out. It's been a while since we talked about the former number 3 overall pick. And I think when he comes back, hopefully healthy and ready, we may see, because Shaq Griffin's played some good football. Steven Nelson has been balling, right? I think he's tied for number 1 in the league in interceptions. So you just add that back to the mix, his talent and how his ability to play cornerback. Man. So we got to figure out what's going on with Derek Stingley. But thank you guys for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast, and follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Give me a follow on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTY DAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.